and welcome to our continuing coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Ladi Akiri-Duluale. The headlines. Pressure mounts as Ukrainian forces and Russian offensive forces mount ferocious battle on the eastern towns of Bakhmut and Soledar. Ukraine stages urban war games near Belarus amidst fears of a Russian assault. And Russia's Wagner Group says it's found a body of a missing Briton in Ukraine. Ukraine and Russia are locked in an information war as well as a deadly struggle underground in Soledar, a salt mining town in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region at the end of the 46th week of the invasion of Ukraine. The Wagner Group's mercenaries have been fighting to take Soledar for weeks in an apparent effort to encircle Bakhmut, which is 10 kilometers to the south, which has been the focus of Russian offensive operations since September. Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin announced that his forces had succeeded, even as he asserted that the battle was continuing. He said units of the Wagner group have taken control of the entire territory of Soledar. A cauldron has been formed in the center of the city in which urban battles are being fought using a common Russian military term for an enclave of defenders. Mr. Prigozhin published a photograph of himself allegedly taken in the salt mines of Soledar, standing next to Wagner fighters. Hours later, Serhiy Cherevati, spokesman of Ukraine's eastern forces, denied Soledar had fallen and called Mr. Prigozhin's picture propaganda. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky mocked Russian claims to have taken over parts of the eastern city of Soledar, saying that fighting was still going on. However, in a separate statement, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces said the Russians were suffering heavy losses as they tried to take Soledar and cut off the supply routes for pro-Kiev units.
Now the terrorist state and its propagandists are trying to pretend that some parts of our city of Soledar, almost completely destroyed by the occupiers, is some kind of Russia's achievement. They will present and are already presenting this to their society in such a way as to support demobilization and to give hope to those who support aggression. But the fighting continues. The Donetsk region is holding out, and we, without a break, even for one day, do everything to strengthen the Ukrainian defense.
And Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu is appointed Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov to oversee the military campaign in Ukraine in the latest shakeup of Moscow's military leadership. General Gerasimov, like General Shoigu, has faced sharp criticism from Russia's hawkish military bloggers for multiple setbacks on the battlefield and Moscow's failure to secure victory in a campaign the Kremlin had expected to take just a short while. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said General Shoigu had appointed General Gerasimov as commander of the Combined Forces Group for the special military operation in Ukraine. It is the most senior position amongst Russia's battlefield generals. Only last October, Russia had put Sergei Surovikin, nicknamed General Armageddon by the Russian media for his reputed ruthlessness, in overall charge of Ukraine operations following a series of counter-offensives by Ukrainian forces that turned the tide of the conflict. The Defense Ministry said General Surovikin will now stay on as a deputy to General Gerasimov. The Defense Ministry said General Surovikin and other changes are designed to increase the effectiveness of military operations in Ukraine. However, Russian pro-war commentators do not appear to have been impressed.
Chief of the General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, will take over as top commander.
Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke on the phone with Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, in which they discussed the war in Syria, as well as bilateral cooperation. That's according to the Kremlin press service. The Kremlin statement did not specify if Mrs. Putin or Raisi discussed the war in Ukraine. As a result of the conversation, the leaders agreed to further increase an entire range of bilateral cooperation between Russia and Iran and implement mutually beneficial projects in the energy, transport, and logistics sectors. According to the official readout published on the Kremlin's official Telegram channel, when discussing international issues, both sides gave a positive assessment of the established course coordination within the framework of the Astana process, which plays a key role in the Syrian settlement. It adds that the intention was expressed to continue cooperation in order to normalize the situation in the Syrian Arab Republic and restore its territorial integrity. The crackle of gunfire and the roar of armored vehicles filled sleepy West Ukrainian towns near the Belarusian border as Kiev's forces trained for the threat of a fresh assault across a new front in the north. Ukraine fears Russia could build up forces on the territory of its Belarusian ally before striking in the northwest or northeast of Ukraine, or even try to drive towards Kiev as it did when it invaded originally in February. By reopening a northern front, Russia would stretch Kiev's forces, which have been focused for months on bloody battles raging in the east and south, forcing it to divert forces to the north. Colonel Roman Volochuk of the 104th Territorial Defense Brigade sought to project an image of strength on the sidelines of the military drills in 3 locations in Ukraine's northwest that the army asked not to be disclosed for security reasons. In a clue as to the kind of attack Ukraine may fear from Belarus, Kiev's troops practiced urban warfare, firing assault rifles, driving armored vehicles, and freeing hostages. Another exercise took place in the snowbound countryside, where troops practiced ambushing and destroying reconnaissance groups in civilian vehicles. Forces from Russia's Wagner group have found the body of one of 2 British voluntary aid workers reported missing in eastern Ukraine. A statement by the private military firm did not mention the name of the dead man, but said documents belonging to both Britons had been found on his body. A photo posted alongside the statement appeared to show passports bearing the names of Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry, the 2 missing workers. Ukrainian police said, however, that they were looking for the pair who went missing in East Ukraine, the scene of heavy fighting between Ukrainian and Russian armed forces. The Wagner statement said, quote, "Today the body of one of them was found. Documents for both Britons were discovered with him." It did not give details on where the body was found. Ukrainian police said the 2 left the city of Kramatorsk for the town of Soledar on Friday morning and were reported missing on Saturday evening after contact with them was lost. Polish President Andrzej Duda said Poland plans to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine as part of an international coalition. Kiev has been requesting heavy military vehicles such as the German-made Leopard 2, which would represent a significant step up in Western support to Ukraine. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky had urged NATO to do more than just promise Ukraine. Its door is open at the July summit, saying Kiev needs powerful steps as it tries to join the military alliance.
Lately, we decided that the moment for Poland to decisively support Ukraine has come. A company of Leopard tanks will be handed over as part of coalition building. Because, as you know, many formal criteria has to be fulfilled and agreements needs to be signed. We want it to be an international coalition, and as part of that coalition, have decided to contribute with the first package of tanks. A company of Leopard tanks. This company, I hope, together with further Leopard tank companies and many other tanks that are going to be delivered, will arrive to Ukraine and strengthen Ukraine's defenses. We have made that decision in Poland.
Szanowni Państwo, prezydenta Republiki Polski Andrzeja Dudy.
That's right. Президент Литовской Республики Гитанас Наусед та президент Республики Польща.
Sights and sounds there of some of the happenings within Ukraine at this moment. But let's talk to former lecturer, diplomatic and consular relations law at the Faculty of Law at the Nasarawa State University, Kefi Chukwemeke Eze, who joins me here in the studio. Good morning to you. Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a look at some of the things that have happened. Let me start, of course, from where we are on the continent.
Sure.
The Chinese foreign minister, and this has been repeated over and over and over, each time there's a new minister, particularly in charge of foreign affairs, his first visit is to the African continent. So I wonder if you were surprised that when the AU, taking advantage of his visit, said, you know, they wanted Chinese support for a permanent seat on the UN Security Council for Africa, he refused to commit China to that request. Were you surprised?
I wasn't surprised because it wasn't part of his mandate in Africa.
Well, but China is a permanent member of the Security Council. So if any country wants to join them, it should begin to lobby them. Am I right?
You are right, but Xi Jinping that sent the new foreign minister, that's Qin Gang, has not sent him to come and promise Africa that China will support it for a permanent seat at the United Nations. So it wasn't part of his mandate. Remember that he commissioned the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Addis Ababa, which China built. And you remember that China also built the AU Commission building in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, in 2013.
Right.
So now he has come purposely to improve the relationship between Africa and China. Remember that Africa has Forum of China-African Cooperation, FOCAC. China has that, and if you look at that, everything about that has to do with infrastructural development, pilots, diplomacy, trade between Africa and China, which is about, as at 2022, 260 billion, and 4 times
what it was.
What? No. 4 times what Africa and the United States
are doing.
Yes, so Africa has, China has an edge. I want to situate this as to why he couldn't have promised to support Africa for that purpose. The Road and Belt Initiative is at the front burner in China-African relations. So they are not interested to come and discuss permanent seat at the United Nations.
But then the Africans, from the initial reactions, were surprised that he did it because all along, what it appeared was that all that had been happening was trade. And as you pointed out, China had been selling a lot to Africa. It had been loaning a lot to Africa and had been, of course, buying a great deal of Africa's natural resources, the oil, the gas, the timber, the cobalt, and all of that from the various countries of Africa. And so they were, diplomatically speaking, they were a bit surprised that not only did he not promise, but he didn't even undertake to probably take the message back or something like that. It was more or less a blunt kind of no.
They must have been naive, because if you know the way power flows in China, it will never be in the mouth of the foreign minister to discuss permanency. It has to be Xi Jinping that will say anything concerning that directly. No foreign minister of China will come and begin to discuss whether they will support you for permanency or not. No.
So that I guess that was a diplomatic foreplay.
Don't come to dictate to me and say it must go this way, it must go this way, after which you live for your, so Africans are more comfortable with China.
Indeed. There are many twists and turns in all of this.
Death trap, but don't forget the death trap.
That's a completely different. We'll have another day. Thank you very much, Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze, for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you very much. After the break, President Vladimir Putin says oil price caps will not create problems for the Russian budget. Details in a moment. Please stay on with us. Welcome back. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says Moscow is monitoring information that alleges Turkey may have supplied cluster munitions to Ukraine. However, he says that it remains difficult to determine the reliability of such reports. Mr. Peskov was speaking during a daily call with reporters where he was quoted as saying, "Of course, we are closely monitoring all this, but it is difficult to speak about the reliability of these reports here. There are more fake news than truthful reports. Everyone is well aware of the deliveries of Bayraktar weapons to Ukraine from Turkey, as well as ammunition for those equipments." Last year, Western and Ukrainian officials praised Turkey's Bayraktar TB2 drones for playing a part in countering Russian attacks. Mr. Peskov adds that Turkey has its obligations as a NATO member country. Its bilateral relations, we also know this, but at the same time, Turkey and Russia are united by very close partnership relations based on mutual benefits, understanding, respect, and mutual willingness to discuss the most difficult problems. Over in the United Kingdom, where the British government is working with partners to discuss how to go further and faster in supporting Ukraine, including the provision of tanks. That's according to the Prime Minister's spokesperson, Max Blaine. When asked by lobby journalists if the United Kingdom would supply tanks to Ukraine, the Prime Minister's spokesperson said, quote, "We are accelerating our support to Ukraine with a kind of next-generation military technology that will help them win this war. It is clear that tanks could provide a game-changing capability to the Ukrainians," and the Prime Minister told President Zelensky last week that we'll provide whatever support we can. The Prime Minister has asked the Defense Secretary to work with partners in the coming weeks to discuss how we can go further and faster on our support to Ukraine, including the provision of tanks. The spokesperson added that it is constantly looking at what equipment Britain can provide. That does not mean that any decisions have been made about providing Challenger 2 tanks right now. And as we've been reporting, China's new Foreign Minister, Qin Gang, has sidestepped a new call by the African Union for permanent representation on the United Nations Security Council during his visit to Ethiopia. Speaking at the opening of the Chinese-built headquarters of the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, Mr. Qin instead emphasized China's partnership with Africa in security and economic development. The African Union Commission Chairman, Moussa Faki, had told a joint press conference that Africa's lack of permanent representation on the Security Council is a burning issue, considering that most issues on the Council agenda are related to African countries. China is one of the Council's 5 permanent members. And the US and Japan have announced a significant strengthening of their military relationship and upgrade of the US military force posture in the country, including the stationing of a newly redesignated Marine unit with advanced intelligence surveillance capabilities and the ability to fire anti-ship missiles, according to 2 US officials who have been briefed on the issue. The US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says that Japanese defense forces that's the 12th Marine Regiment to be specific, and artillery brigades would be based in undisclosed locations within Japan and will be redesignated. The announcement sends a strong signal to China and comes as part of a series of initiatives designed to underscore a rapid acceleration of security and intelligence ties between both countries. Let's talk now to our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, who joins us virtually from there. Morning to you, Maria.
Good morning.
Now, what made headlines, of course, was this controversial election for speakership in the U.S. You and I had discussed last year, towards the tail end of the year, when we talked about what would happen if the Republicans took control of either one or both of the houses of the Congress. Well, that didn't happen. They only got one, and it was very slim, which resulted in the controversy. But now the speaker has finally been elected. What can you tell us about what that means in terms of the support that the U.S. may be able to offer, particularly in terms of funding and approvals for the release of weapons, particularly more sophisticated ones, to Ukraine?
You're exactly correct. The historic vote for Speaker with, as you said, the slim majority, us having a historic voting cycle for that speakership has definitely put, I think, a little bit of a strain, as you said, on potentially what it will look like for the Ukraine policy as it relates to the House of Representatives. Now, what we did discuss previously is that we did know that Republicans might have a much different view on the type of financial support that is provided to Ukraine. One of the reasons why that is speculated that some Republicans did change their vote and move forward with voting for Speaker McCarthy was due to the fact that he had promised to reduce the amount of funding from Congress as it relates to the Ukraine war. And so we can expect to see that there will potentially be a reduction in spending. There will be potentially a reduction in the amount of funds that are approved by Congress to move forward with the support for Ukraine, whether or not it's emergency support or whether or not it's armed support. But the president was very well aware of that. I think the president prepared for that. And we probably will see executive orders and potentially directly from the executive branch of government as it relates to further support of the Ukraine.
Now, related to that, of course, the Republicans had made clear that once they took control in the House of Representatives, they were also going to launch all kinds of investigations, including into how the previous funds that had already been approved and released for the Ukrainian effort had been spent. And then the news broke that some classified documents were found in President Biden's former think tank office. And that's one, at least, of those documents related to Ukraine. We are, of course, it's in the public domain that his son had business ties with Ukraine before all this happened, talking about oil and gas. How is all of that playing out?
Well, as you said, with us having a split Congress and with the House being led by Republicans, there has obviously been a call for those records to be brought forth to Congress by January 24th, those classified records, which we could expect, especially after what we saw with the former President Trump's file being requested, subpoenaed, and all that has gone on over the past few months in that area as well. And so what the Department of Justice has done, they have the files, they have reviewed, they're reviewing the files. They have not yet, they've had a number of conversations with the judge that has been assigned to those files. There's been no further action as it relates to questioning of the president or anyone else that would have been involved with those private files. They also stated that along with having the files of information around Ukraine, there was also information around his son's funeral services. So it was a combination of records that were included within his office and the think tank while he was vice president. So I think what we're going to probably see is Department of Justice will come forth and provide some additional guidance, but we probably will see by January 24th if the records are not carried over to Congress, by then that Congress will be calling forth, and we will see a lot more action in that area.
Now, the Republicans, as you would probably expect, have been trying to create some equivalence here between these documents and what was found with former President Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago residence late last year following that raid by the FBI. But there are important differences as we're coming to learn. But then, given the scenario as it is now, has this put, do you think, former President Trump back in the center of the political dynamism or mechanics ahead of 2024, especially because both sides now seem to be talking more strongly about Ukraine?
You know, that's a very interesting question. But one of the things that was evaluated and that was clear through the speakership vote was that even the Republican Party is very split. Not all Republicans are in alignment with former President Trump's ideologies, his practices, in the way in which he has governed. And so as a result of that, I think that we are not necessarily going to see that President Trump will be the Republicans' nominee for 2024, and that not all Republicans will support. You do have a minority of Republicans that are very much in alignment with the former president, but you also have seen in this election cycle has allowed us to see that some Republicans are not looking for his support, and nor will he support due to the fact of the way in which they govern and the way in their views and ideologies around what's best for the country. So I think this is a very interesting election where one would think that this putting the former president back in a position to run, but it also showed the difference in some of the challenges that currently exist within the Republican Party.
Now, I can't let you go, but to link all of this, of course, to why, because at the beginning, I talked about the fact that the Republicans didn't do as well as even the opinion polls suggested in the midterms. And some put that down to the way the economy recovered so quickly just in time for that election. Now we're in the new year, of course, and the questions remain that, look, ahead of 2024, it's probably going to be decided one way or the other, still on economic issues and how the U.S. citizens feel that they're fed. What's the situation now, particularly with energy prices?
So, as you stated, the energy prices in the economy did recover so much. We're still dealing with potential increases in interest rates due to some challenges with inflation. But as you said, with energy prices having stabilized, we know that President Biden has also gone into oil reserves. He's also stated that he will do what's necessary to keep energy costs, specifically gas prices, down as much as possible. We also know that the Federal Reserve Chairman Powell has worked very hard to ensure that he can stabilize inflation as much as possible, even if that means a spike in interest rates, which we had not seen in many years. And so I think that spike in interest rates, some areas specifically with the stock market might have caused some challenge, but for the everyday American, I think that they've been able to sustain despite that. So the recovery of the economy, to your point, has played a role in what we saw success for the Democrats, despite the fact that the very slim majority in the House.
Indeed. Maria, as always, many thanks for the analysis and the reporting. And you have yourself a pleasant day ahead. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
And Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Arsen says Russia's oil producers have had no difficulties in securing export deals despite Western sanctions and price caps. Mr. Alexander Novak told the meeting led by President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, quote, "We've been in constant contact with companies. The contracts are making for February has been completed. And on the whole, the companies are not saying they have problems as of today." Russian oil production has so far shown resilience in the face of sanctions imposed after Moscow sent troops into Ukraine on February the 24th, 2022, and of the price caps introduced by Western countries last month. President Putin last month had signed a decree that banned the supply of crude oil and oil products from February the 1st, for 5 months for nations that abide by the cap. Mr. Novak said the main problem for Russian oil was a high discount to international benchmarks as well as rising freight costs. Mr. Putin, who has long advocated the idea of reversing the price differentials in favor of Russian oil, told Mr. Novak that the state budget should not suffer as a result of the discount. Mr. Putin struck an upbeat tone about the wider Russian economy. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says it has not yet seen any cases of price caps on Russian oil imposed by the West last month in comments about possible losses from such measures. Some analysts had previously said that the caps will have little immediate impact on the oil revenues that Moscow is currently earning. Currently, Russian flagship Euro crude blend is traded below the price cap level of $60 per barrel, imposed by the West as part of sanctions against Moscow over its military actions in Ukraine.
It is obvious that there's no factual data for such conclusions. This is why I regard with skepticism all these prognostic figures. For one, the options for making price forecasts on the world markets are very narrow, and this is typical for such a turbulent period. As far as the losses are concerned, no one has especially seen the caps yet. As you know, we have a presidential decree to ship oil to the countries which observe price caps in force. This is why we skeptically consider such estimations of Russian multi-billion losses due to price cap. Of course, Russia will do everything to ensure its interests, and restrictive measures adopted against Russia will face counteraction. Russia will balance its interests, this is for sure. The market allows us to do this.
And when we return, Ukraine's president expresses hope there will be no world war during speech at Golden Globe Awards ceremony in the U.S. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Let's talk to Ini John Mekwa, who joins me now on the program. Morning, Ini.
Morning.
The Bank of Russia is going to restart open market foreign exchange operations to support the ruble against the Chinese yuan.
Yes.
Against it.
Against it, because remember, first of all, that operations were closed in the FX exchange because, obviously, access to dollar. And then at that time, a lot of people were demanding for dollar, which was a very scarce commodity. Still is a very scarce commodity.
Yeah, because they want to get out.
Exactly. And they needed, something that would be accepted out there. So they had to shut down operations of foreign exchange in Moscow. So now they want to reopen starting from tomorrow. But it's going to be mainly trading in the Chinese yuan. That's what it's going to be. And it seems like the Chinese yuan, or the relationship between Russia and China, gets even tighter. So apart from the oil and gas relationship that they have, now they're trading, they're looking for ways to exchange it. So you can actually go to the Moscow exchange, foreign exchange, and get the yuan there, and interact or do your transactions within the country. So already they said that the yuan is accounting, okay, that was last year. The figures are not out for this year yet, still early. More than 70%, about almost 20% of transactions are being done in yuan at the exchange. Already. So with this opening and then the focus on the yuan, we believe that it will actually, of course, it will
the numbers will go up.
Will go up more. But they did have some condition to say that before they will open this, and this gives us a little bit of backstory, that last year they made a statement that for them to start trading again in the FX and even to buy yuan and all of that, then that means that the revenue budget for this year has to exceed 80 trillion rubles. So that means that when you look at the budget,
in fact exceeded 80 trillion rubles.
So we're still talking about price cap. I heard you talk about price cap just before I came on and all that. And they're still making, or they still expect to make more than 80 trillion rubles this year alone from oil and gas, not from every other thing.
And the president has given the prime minister instructions that the discounts being offered must not affect the revenue budget.
Must not affect.
This is interesting. Foreign investors will have access to a simplified procedure for obtaining residence permits in Russia starting on the 11th, which was yesterday.
Yes.
With the relevant government decree coming into force.
Okay, so it's very important. I'm glad that you read that relevant government decree, because I don't know how access
is going to work, really.
Yeah, so I just did this so that I'll just read out the details of that access. So if you want to have a permanent residence in Russia, perhaps it is easier now, but these are the conditions you have to meet. You have to invest at least 15 million rubles in socially critical region or projects in Russia. 15 million rubles. Or you will invest 30 million rubles in a Russian company within 3 years. And you must ensure that that company has been operating for at least 3 years and paying taxes and fees of 6 million rubles in a year. So when they say it's easy, you know, you just think,
it's relative.
Yes, you just think, oh, I'll just apply. Oh, Russia is easy to get into now.
Yeah, I could already see some people writing down what you're
so
saying.
That's why I had to just, you know, and there's even more. You can also apply by operating in Russia for 2 years, by getting a registration and subsequent possession of a legal entity in Russia for 2 years, paying annual fees of 4 million rubles in taxes.
Basically, this is about money. What's going on here is that this residence is being offered a return for investment.
But guess what? Even if you meet all of this, the government still has the right to reject
the application.
So don't think it's
tough. Thanks, Ini. Ini, of course, will probably give more details about this residency deal in her program coming up after this show and then later on in the afternoon. So if you're interested in that, please watch out for the program. Let's take a quick look at the sport. Russia's Andrei Rublev has crashed out of the second round of the Adelaide International after losing 6-4, 3-6, 6-3 to local defending champion Tanasi Kokinakis. Cheered on by the home support, Kokinakis wrapped up a match in just under 2 hours, hitting 35 winners and sending down 17 aces. World number 6, Rublev, struggled to find his form against Kokinakis, who served incredibly well throughout the match. And figure skater Kamila Valieva, currently facing a 4-year drugs ban after testing positive before the 2022 Winter Olympic Games in Beijing, has been voted Russia's most popular athlete. The annual survey conducted by the state-owned All-Russian Public Opinion Research Center saw the 16-year-old Valieva named by 7% off the poll, with 3-time Olympic cross-country gold medalist Alexander Bolshinov second with 5%, and National Hockey League star Alexander Ovechkin third on 4%. And finally, on the program, during a virtual appearance at the 80th Golden Globe Awards, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country will stop Russia's invasion, but that there are still battles and tears ahead. Actor Sean Penn introduced Mr. Zelensky as a very real-world example, adding that the leader's courage would inspire movie writers and directors. Mr. Zelensky thanked people from the free world for their support in the fight for freedom and democracy.
Executive producer and director Miguel Sapach.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants of the 80th Golden Globe Award ceremony, the award was won at a special time. The Second World War wasn't over yet, but the tide was turned. All knew who would win. There were still battles and tears ahead. It was then when the Golden Globe Award appeared to honor best performers of 1943. It is now 2023. The war in Ukraine is not over yet, but the tide is turning, and it is already clear who will win. There were still battles and tears ahead. But now I can definitely tell you who was the best in the previous year. It was you, the free people of the free world, those who united around the support of the free Ukrainian people in our common struggle for freedom, democracy, for the right to live, to love, to give birth, no matter who you are, no matter where you are from, no matter who you are with. The struggle for the right of the new generations to know about the war only from movies. The First World War claimed millions of lives. The Second World War claimed tens of millions of them. There will be no Third World War. It is not a trilogy. Ukraine will stop the Russian aggression on our land. We will make it together with the whole free world. And I hope that all of you will be with us on the victorious day, the day of our victory. Slava Ukraini!
And that's where we wrap up the program this morning. Thanks for being with us. My name is Ladi Akiri. Do have yourself a pleasant day ahead. Good morning.